Section 20 of the Public Orations of Demosthenes. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Public Orations of Demosthenes, translated by Arthur Wallace Pickard. On the Chersonese, Part 1. Introduction. Late in the year 343, some time after the acquittal of Aeschines, Philip invaded Epirus, made Alexander, brother of his wife Olympias, king of the Molosse instead of Aribus, and so secured his own influence in that region. Aribus was honorably received at Athens. Philip next threatened Ambracia and Leucas, which were colonies of Corinth, and promised to restore Naupactus, which was in the hands of the Achaeans, to the Aetolians. But Athens sent Demosthenes, Hegesippus, Polyeuctus, and others to rouse the Corinthians to resistance, and also dispatched a force of citizens to Acarnania to help in the defense against Philip. Philip thereupon returned, captured Echinus and Nicaea on the Malian Gulf, and established a tetrarch in each division of Thessaly. 343 BC, or early in 342. In 342, Philistides was established, by Philip's influence, as tyrant at Orius in Euboea, as Clitarchus had been at Eretria in the preceding year, and the democratic leader Euphrius committed suicide in prison. The town of Chalcis, however, under Callias and Chersonese, remained friendly to Athens and made a treaty of alliance with her. About the same time, a controversy begun in the previous year in regard to Halonessus was renewed. This island had belonged to Athens, but had been occupied by pirates. At some time not recorded, but probably since the peace of 346, Philip had expelled the pirates and taken possession of the island. He now sent a letter offering to give Halonessus to Athens, but not to give it back, since this would concede their right to it, or else to submit the dispute to arbitration. He also offered to discuss a treaty for the settlement of private disputes between Athenians and Macedonians, and to concert measures with Athens for clearing the Aegean of pirates. He was willing to extend the advantages of the peace to other Greek states, but not to agree that he and Athens should respectively possess what was their own, instead of what they held, though he was ready to submit to arbitration in regard to Cardia and other disputed places. He again denied having made the promises attributed to him, and asked for the punishment of those who slandered him. Hegesippus replied in an extant speech on Halonessus, while Demosthenes insisted that no impartial arbitrator could possibly be found. Philip's terms in regard to Halonessus were refused, but the Athenian claim to the island was not withdrawn. Philip spent the greater part of 342 and 341 in Thrace, mainly in the valley of the Hebrus, where he endured very great hardships through the winter, and founded colonies of Macedonian soldiers, the chief of these being Philippopolis and Kabyle. He also entered into relations with the Getae beyond the Hemus, and garrisoned Apollonia on the Euxine. These operations were all preparatory to his projected attack upon Byzantium. Byzantium and Athens were at this time on unfriendly terms, owing to the part taken by the latter in the social war. But the immediate subject of the present speech was the state of affairs in the Chersonese in 342. The Chersonese, with the exception of Cardia, had been secured for Athens in 357, but had been threatened by Philip in 352, when he made alliance with Cardia and forced the neighbouring Thracian prince Cersobleptes to submit. Soon after the peace of Philocrates, Athens sent settlers to the Chersonese under Diopithes. Cardia alone refused to receive them, and Diopithes, with a mercenary force, prepared to compel the Cardians to admit them, while Philip sent troops to hold the town and complained to Athens in threatening terms of the actions of Diopithes, and more particularly of an inroad which Diopithes had made upon Philip's territory in Thrace. Diopithes had been ill supported with money and men by Athens, and had had recourse to piratical actions in order to obtain supplies, thus arousing some indignation at Athens. But the prospect of the heavy expenditure which would be necessary if an expedition were sent to his aid was also unattractive. Demosthenes, however, proposed that Diopithes should be vigorously supported on the ground that Philip was really at war with Athens, and that this was not the time to interfere with a general who alone was pushing the Athenian cause. The speech was delivered early in the spring of 341. It is a masterpiece of oratory, at once statesmanlike and impassioned, and shows a complete command of every variety of tone. The latter part of it contains a strong denunciation of the Macedonian party in Athens, a defense of the orator's own career, and an urgent demand for the punishment of disloyalty. At the same time, Demosthenes does not embody the policy which he advises in any formal motion. For this we have to wait for the third Philippic. End of introduction. It was the duty, men of Athens, of every speaker not to allow either malice or favour to influence any speech which he might make, but simply to declare the policy which he considered to be the best, particularly when your deliberations were concerned with public affairs of great importance. But since there are some who are led on to address you, partly out of contentiousness, partly from causes which I need not discuss, it is for you, men of Athens, you, the people, to dismiss all other considerations, and both in the votes that you give and in the measures that you take, to attend solely to what you believe to be for the good of the city. Now our present anxiety arises out of affairs in the Chersonese and the campaign, now in its 11th month, which Philip is conducting in Thrace. But most of the speeches which we have heard have been about the acts and intentions of Diopithes. For my part, I conceive that all charges made against anyone who is amenable to the laws and can be punished by you when you will, are matters which you are free to investigate, either immediately or after an interval as you think fit. And there is no occasion for me or anyone else to use strong language about them. But all those advantages which an actual enemy of the city with a large force in the Hellespont is trying to snatch from you, and which, if we once fall behindhand, we shall no longer be able to recover, these surely are matters upon which our interest demands that our plans be formed and our preparations made with the utmost dispatch, and that no clamour, no accusations about other matters be allowed to drive us from this point. Often as I am surprised at the assertions which are habitually made in your presence, nothing, men of Athens, has surprised me more than the remark which I heard only lately in the council, that one who advises you ought forsooth to advise you plainly either to go to war or to keep the peace. Very good. If Philip is remaining inactive, if he is keeping nothing that is ours in violation of the peace, if he is not organizing all mankind against us, there is nothing more to be said. We have simply to observe the peace, and I see that, for your part, you are quite ready to do so. But what if the oath that we swore, and the terms upon which we made the peace, stand inscribed for our eyes to see? What if it is proved that from the outset, before Diopithes sailed from Athens with the settlers who are now accused of having brought about the war, Philip wrongfully seized many of our possessions, and here, unrepealed, are your resolutions charging him with this? and that all along he has been uninterruptedly seizing the possessions of the other Hellenic and foreign peoples and uniting their resources against us. What is then the meaning of the statement that we ought either to go to war or to keep the peace? For we have no choice in the matter. Nothing remains open to us but the most righteous and most necessary of all acts, the act that they deliberately refuse to consider, I mean the act of retaliation against the aggressor. Unless, indeed, they intend to argue that, so long as Philip keeps away from Attica and the Piraeus, he does the city no wrong, and is not committing acts of war. But if this is their criterion of right and wrong, if this is their definition of peace, then although what they say is iniquitous, intolerable, and inconsistent with your security, as all must see, at the same time these very statements are actually contradictory of the charges which they are making against Diopithes. Why, I beg to ask, are we to give Philip full leave to act in whatever way he chooses, so long as he does not touch Attica, when Diopithes is not to be allowed even to assist the Thracians without being accused of initiating war? But even if this inconsistency is brought home to them, still, we are told, the conduct of the mercenaries in ravaging the Hellespontine country is outrageous, and Diopithes has no right to drive the vessels to shore and ought to be stopped. I grant it, let it be done. I have nothing to say against it. Yet, nevertheless, if their advice is genuinely based on considerations of right and right alone, I consider that they are bound to prove that, as surely as they are seeking to break up the force on which Athens at present relies, by slandering its commander to you when he tries to provide funds to support it, so surely Philip's force will be disbanded if you accept their advice. If they fail to prove this, you must consider that they are simply setting the city once more upon the same course which has already resulted in the utter ruin of her fortunes. For surely you know that nothing in the world has contributed so much to Philip's successes as his being always first on the scene of action. With a standing force always about him, and knowing beforehand what he intends to do, he suddenly falls upon whomsoever he pleases, while we wait until we learn that something is happening, and only then, in a turmoil, make our preparations. It follows, of course, that every position which he has attacked he holds in undisturbed possession, while we are all behindhand. All our expenditure proves to have been so much useless waste. We have displayed our hostility and our desire to check him, but we are too late for action, and so we add disgrace to failure. You must therefore not fail to recognize, men of Athens, that now, as before, all else that you hear consists of mere words and pretexts, and that the real aim of all that is being done is to secure that you may remain at home, that Athens may have no force outside the city, and that thus Philip may give effect to all his desires without let or hindrance. Consider, in the first place, what is actually occurring at the present moment. He is at present passing the time in Thrace with a great army under him, and, as we are told by those who are on the spot, he is sending for a large addition to it from Macedonia and Thessaly. Now, if he waits for the Etesian winds, and then goes to Byzantium and besieges it, tell me first whether you think that the Byzantines will persist in their present infatuation, and will not call upon you and entreat you to go to their aid? I do not think so. Why, I believe that they would open their gates to men whom they distrust even more than they distrust you, if such exist, rather than surrender the city to Philip, supposing, that is, that he does not capture them first. And then, if we are unable to set sail from Athens, and if there are no forces there on the spot to help them, nothing can prevent their destruction. Of course, you say, for the men are possessed, and their infatuation passes all bounds. Very true, and yet they must be preserved, for the interests of Athens require it. And besides, we cannot by any means be certain that he will not invade the Chersonese. Indeed, if we are to judge by the letter which he has sent to you, he there says that he will punish the settlers in the Chersonese. If then the army that is now formed there is in existence, it will be able to help the Chersonese, and to injure some part of Philip's country. But when once it is dissolved, what shall we do if he marches against the Chersonese? We shall of course put Diopithes on his trial. And how will that improve our position? Well, we should go to the rescue from Athens ourselves. What if the winds make it impossible? But of course he will not really get there. And who can guarantee that? Do you realize, men of Athens, or take into account what the coming season of the year is, the season against which some think you ought to evacuate the Hellespont and hand it over to Philip? What if when he leaves Thrace he does not go near the Chersonese or Byzantium at all, for this too is a possibility which you must consider, but comes to Chalcis or Megara, just as he lately came to Orius? Is it better to resist him here and to allow the war to come into Attica, or provide something to keep him busy there? The latter course is surely the better. Realizing these things, therefore, as you all must, and taking due account of them, you must not, heaven knows, look askance at the force which Diopithes is trying to provide for Athens, or attempt to disband it. You must yourself prepare another force to support it. You must help him freely with money, and give him in all other respects your loyal cooperation. If Philip were asked to say whether he would wish these soldiers, who are now with Diopithes, describe them as you will, for I in no way dispute your description, to be prosperous and in high favour with the Athenians, and to be augmented in numbers by the cooperation of the city, or whether he would rather see them broken up and destroyed in consequence of calumnious charges against them, he would prefer, I imagine, the latter alternative. Can it then be that there are men among us here who are trying to bring about the very thing that Philip would pray heaven for? And if so, do you need to seek any further for the cause of the total ruin of the city's fortunes? I wish therefore to examine without reserve the present crisis of our affairs, to inquire what we ourselves are now doing, and how we are dealing with it. We do not wish to contribute funds, nor to serve with the forces in person. We cannot keep our hands from the public revenues. We do not give the contributions of the allies to Diopithes, nor do we approve of such supplies as he raises for himself. But we look malignantly at him, we ask whence he gets them, what he intends to do, and every possible question of that kind, and yet we are still not willing to confine ourselves to our own affairs in consequence of the attitude which we have adopted. We still praise with our lips those who uphold the dignity of the city, though in our acts we are fighting on the side of their opponents. Now, whenever anyone rises to speak, you always put to him the question, "What are we to do?" I wish to put to you the question, "What are we to say?" For if you will neither contribute, nor serve in person, nor leave the public funds alone, nor grant him the contributions, nor let him get what he can for himself, nor yet confine yourselves to your own affairs, I do not know what I can say. For when you give such license to those who desire to make charges and accusations, that you listen to them even when they denounce him by anticipation for his alleged intentions, well, what can one say? The possible effect of this is a matter which some of you require to understand, and I will speak without reserve, for indeed I could not speak otherwise. All the commanders who have ever yet sailed from Athens, if I am wrong, I consent to any penalty that you please, take money from the Chians, from the Erythraeans, from any people from whom they can severally get it. I mean any of the Asiatic settlers who are now in question. Those who have 1 or 2 ships take less, those who have a larger force take more, and those who give to them do not give either little or much for nothing. They are not so insane. In fact, with these sums, they buy immunity from injury for the merchants who sail from their ports, freedom from piracy, the convoying of their vessels, and so on. They call the gifts benevolences, and that is the name given to the sums thus obtained. And in the present case, when Diopithes is there with his army, it is obvious that all these people will give him money. From what other source do you imagine that a general can maintain his troops, when he has received nothing from you, and has no resources from which he can pay his men? Will money drop from the sky? Of course not. He subsists upon what he can collect or beg or borrow. The real effect, therefore, of the accusations made against him here is simply to warn everyone that they should refuse to give him anything, since he is to pay the penalty for his very intentions, not to speak of any action that he may have taken or any success that he may have achieved. That is the only meaning of the cry that he is preparing a blockade, or he is surrendering the Hellenes. Do any of his critics care about the Hellenes who live in Asia? Were it so, they would be more thoughtful for the rest of mankind than for their own country, and the proposal to send another general to the Hellespont amounts to no more than this. For if Diopithes is acting outrageously and is driving the vessels to shore, then, gentlemen, 1 little wax tablet is enough to put an end to it all. And what the laws command is that for these offences we should impeach the wrongdoers, not that we should keep a watch upon our own forces at such expense and with so many ships. Such insanity really passes all bounds. No, against the enemy whom we cannot arrest and render amenable to the laws, it is both right and necessary to maintain a force, to send warships, and to contribute war funds. But against one of ourselves, a decree, an impeachment, a dispatch boat will answer our purpose. These are the means which sensible men would use. The policy of the other side is the policy of men whose spitefulness is ruining your fortunes. And that there should be some such man, but though it is not the worst. No, for you who sit there are already in such a frame of mind that if anyone comes forward and says that Diopithes is the cause of all the mischief, or Charis, or Aristophon, or any Athenian citizen that he happens to name, you at once agree and clamorously declare that he is right. But if anyone comes forward and tells you the truth and says, "Men of Athens, this is nonsense. It is Philip that is the cause of all this mischief and trouble, for if he were quiet, the city would have nothing to disturb her," you cannot indeed deny the truth of his words, but you seem, I think, to be annoyed, as though you were losing something. And the cause of these things is this, and I beseech you in heaven's name to let me speak unreservedly when I am speaking for your true good, that some of your politicians have contrived that you should be terrifying and severe in your assemblies, but easy-going and contemptible in your preparations for war. And accordingly, if anyone names as the culprit someone whom you know you can arrest in your own midst, you agree and you wish to act. But if one is named, whom you must first master by force of arms, if you are to punish him at all, you are at a loss, I fancy, what to do, and you are vexed when this is brought home to you. For your politicians, men of Athens, should have treated you in exactly the opposite way to this. They should train you to be kind and sympathetic in your assemblies, for there it is with the members of your own body and your own allies that your case is argued. But your terrors and your severity should be displayed in your preparations for war, where the struggle is with your enemies and your rivals. As it is, by their popular speeches and by courting your favor to excess, they have brought you into such a condition that, while in your assemblies you give yourselves airs and enjoy their flattery, listening to nothing but what is meant to please you, in the world of facts and events you are in the last extremity of peril. Imagine, in God's name, what would happen if the Hellenes were to call you to account for the opportunities which, in your indolence, you have now let pass, and were to put you the question, "Is it true, men of Athens, that you send envoys to us on every possible occasion to tell us of Philip's designs against ourselves and all the Hellenes, and of the duty of keeping guard against the man, and to warn us in every way?" We should have to confess that it was true. We do act thus. Then they would proceed, "Is it true, you most contemptible of all men, that though the man has been away for 10 months, and has been cut off from every possibility of returning home by illness and by winter and by wars, you have neither liberated Euboea nor recovered any of your own possessions? Is it true that you have remained at home unoccupied and healthy, if such a word can be used of men who behave thus, and have seen him set up 2 tyrants in Euboea, one to serve as a fortress directly menacing Attica, the other to watch Cyathus, and that you have not even rid yourselves of these dangers? Granted that you did not want to do anything more, but have let them be. Obviously you have retired in his favor, and have made it evident that if he dies 10 times over, you will not make any move the more. Why trouble us then with your embassies and your accusations? If they speak thus to us, what will be our answer? What shall we say, Athenians? I do not see what we can say. End of section 20.